I don't care how many of you there are. I won't be denied my destiny. I am Revan!
Why does Darth Revan always lose in Star Wars The Old Republic, becoming but a shell of his former glory?
Revan was power. It was like staring into the heart of the Force. Even then you could see the Jedi he would slay etched on his soul.
The same Darth Revan who was so powerful, he once famously defeated the Mandalorians where the Jedi could not, and faced and killed Mandalore the Ultimate in single combat, and even confronted his one-time apprentice, Darth Malak, in an epic duel in which he came out the victor, changing the fate of the galaxy itself forever. All of which he explains in a very succinct and badass speech when the player first confronts Revan at the Foundry and the Empire side of the story of Star Wars The Old Republic.
Think what you want, it doesn't matter. I've saved the Republic twice before. I've fought Mandalores and armies of the dark side. You won't stop me.
Then, as one of the only living beings in recorded history to use the light and dark side in tandem like a human force of nature.
I've known both sides of the Force, light and dark.
Only to get his ass handed to him repeatedly throughout the Old Republic and its later expansion, leaving fans feeling perhaps as hollow as Revan feels after being defeated by their hand, and his labours seemingly all for naught.
And in the end, as the darkness takes me, I am nothing.
So in the end, was Revan destined by the Force to be nothing as his former apprentice so too mused? Was this simply a poor decision by BioWare, or is there a deeper lore significance to Revan's lost power and subsequent defeat? To ask and answer why BioWare seemingly dismantled the genius of the first Knights of the Old Republic and how these actions unsurprisingly caused backlash to ensue from longtime KOTOR fans, well, we have to go back to the beginning.
You cannot win, Revan.
At the beginning of KOTOR, we the player see a defeated Revan versus the Jedi strike team betrayed by his apprentice in an unexplained dream. Rising from humble beginnings as a lowly unknown soldier of the Republic who's suffering from amnesia and perplexingly experience increasingly recurrent flashbacks throughout the game. And for the first half of Knights of the Old Republic, we hear an unending deluge of dialogue hinting at the elusive Sith Lord once known as Revan and his legendary exploits.
Have you never asked yourself how Revan took the Republic and Jedi beneath him? How he made them his?
People whisper his name in utterance of his power, being a once fabled hero of the Republic and his great deeds, saving the galaxy only then to turn heel and wrought terror on the very galaxy he saved. Brilliant, awe-inspiring, and undeniably terrible, we are told was the power of the Revankist, a name born of revenge.
Strong influence indeed.
Upon further progressing through KOTOR's main storyline, we then learn of our true heritage by the midpoint of the game. In a stroke of genius writing, it's revealed that we are, or were in fact, the same Darth Revan we see in our fevered dreams, and now are known as not in fact dreams, but our own memories. Delivering not only one of the greatest plot twists in a video game, but never impeding on our own choice of freedom thereafter. Revan's past remains the grounding for inspiration or perhaps revulsion based on the player's own moral proclivities. However, Revan's future is now the player's and allows us to choose to represent light, dark, or explore the murky grey shades inextricably interwoven with a myriad of moral choices in a well-written RPG, giving us, the player, unfettered freedom to express ourselves and shape Revan's destiny, and that truly, it seems, from that point on, anyone could be behind the mask. Indeed, Revan becomes less a person outside of their legendary past, but a course of action Represented by a shared mask and emotions, every person's journey through Knights of the Old Republic is potentially as unique as an individual's fingerprint, making the experience and people's attachment to Revan all the more personal. As an aside, this made having Revan appear in any future installments tremendously difficult for several obvious reasons, as dissimilar to BioWare's other classics such as Baldur's Gate 2 or the Mass Effect series, unlike Commander Shepard, you cannot carry over your progression from the previous installment and effectively step back into Revan's shoes again. Instead, BioWare opted for a rigid canonical ending and sent Revan into the unknown regions with his tale, as it's now confirmed Revan is a he, begins on his own first step away from player freedom of choice, never allowing the player to assume the role of Revan again. He then embarks on a quest which results in a long line of failure, in which ultimately we don't even have a choice to fight by his side. But before we delve into BioWare's decision to not allow the player to aid Revan past an initial introduction, what actually happened to Revan post Knights of the Old Republic to make him unaidable or indeed an enemy of the Republic or Sith Empire alike? For quick story points, the following transpired, from KOTOR to the end of SWTOR.
Revan was power. It was like staring into the heart of the Force.
At the conclusion of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, two different endings are presented to the player based on the player's moral choices throughout the game. Although it should be noted, the light side ending is canon, regardless, both of which sees Revan's former apprentice Malak perish at his hands on the Starforge.
And in the end, as the darkness takes me, I am nothing.
And interestingly, whether Revan A reassumes his old title as Dark Lord of the Sith and takes control of the Starforge,
All hail Lord Revan,
or B instead remains a Jedi Knight, chooses to destroy the Starforge with his newfound love Bastila by his side, the outcome of the story is actually inevitably the same. Although Revan was destined for victory against Malak, he was also fated to tread a familiar path, and eventually either abandons his post with the Republic or his own reforged Sith Empire in lieu of heading into the unknown regions alone to face a looming threat he senses once more. Aggravatingly though, not much was known of the fate of the one-time Dark Lord turned savior of the Republic, and Revan then remained much of an enigma as ever. Even in KOTOR 2, thanks to some fluid dialogue of Kreia to keep us, the audience, guessing.
Do you wonder where he wanders now, Mandalore? Why he gave you your orders, then abandoned you at the edge of the galaxy?
How do you know that?
Preserving whatever choices the player made in the first game, seemingly keeping them intact and undisturbed. That is, until we finally learn of Revan's true fate.
He said that there were places where he had to walk where I could not go. But it was like the war didn't end for him.
As seen in Revan's self-titled novel, bridging the events of the KOTOR series into the Old Republic MMO, after Revan defeats Malak, he tries to settle down in a life with Bastila and the Jedi Order, yet ultimately is called into the unknown regions by an ever-lurking threat.
He would keep remembering things that he'd done, and it kept driving him. And I think he finally remembered something terrible that he'd done during the Mandalorian Wars, and he went to put an end to it.
Revan, during his investigation of said threat, is then captured and tortured by a Sith named Lord Scourge. However, parallel to Bastila, who was tortured and turned to the dark side by Darth Malak, instead, Revan, who was tortured by Scourge, in turn eventually sways his oppressor and manages to enlist Lord Scourge to his cause of taking down the Emperor, who then reunites Revan with his mask, in which he regains all his lost memories and his power is complete as he becomes wholly Revan once more. Having retained his light personality and his old dark side powers in tandem, Revan, with his regained memory, then faces the old threat which he remembered, a Sith Emperor, Vitiate.
The circle closes. The end begins.
With a small strike team by his side, he confronts the Emperor. However, as he nearly overpowers Vitiate using the light and dark side of the Force together, it's Scourge who betrays Revan due to an impromptu Force vision and believes it's the wrong time for his triumph, and instead sides with the Emperor.
As I told your council, the Emperor's plan is not to rule the galaxy, but to consume it.
Revan then is overwhelmed by his old nemesis, the Emperor. Instead of being killed, however, he's used as almost a Force battery to draw on in a state of undeath, fated, thanks to Scourge, for centuries of torment. Until the events of SWTOR, where the player on the Republic side finds Revan once more and frees him from the Maelstrom prison. Although oddly, you will most likely have Scourge in your party if you are a Jedi Knight. The same Sith who betrayed Revan to the Emperor, yet Revan doesn't even react to Scourge whatsoever.
Where? What's happened? I can feel... No. What have you done? There's nothing to restrain him now.
You were the one being restrained.
My struggle held the Emperor in check. How did you find me?
Your strength fails. You must be free, or all is lost.
The Emperor is death. For you, for me, for the galaxy.
Listen to yourself. If you use the Foundry to exterminate billions, how are you any better?
After Revan's release from the Emperor's clutches and alignment with the Republic, he fights the player character if aligned with the Empire in the Foundry. However, Revans Gambit to again try to defeat the Emperor, this time is heavily reliant on a similar plot device to the original Knights of the Old Republic. Revan reclaims a piece of Rakatan tech called the Foundry, even though all Rakatan tech is powered by the dark side, and justifies unleashing a droid army on the Empire, killing billions.
If you use the Foundry to exterminate billions, how are you any better?
I'm doing this to save lives, not for glory. I will mourn for the dead and do what I must.
The exact reason why Revan shut down the Starforge in the first place. Adding insult to injury, Revan is then defeated not by the Emperor, but at the hands of the player around the midpoint of the game. Although Revan has his mask in possession and is supposedly bolstered by the Foundry no less, the player character in SWTOR and their party overwhelm one of the most powerful light and dark side Force users of all time. After his defeat, as he flashes into a brilliant plume of lightning, he echoes the same words Malik once said to him, as his efforts, or more accurately, our efforts, ultimately were for naught. But that's not where Revan's story ends.
And in the end, as the darkness takes me, I am nothing. Now I know how you felt, my friend.
You're so naive, Wrath. You don't even begin to comprehend what I've become.
With the Jedi Knight in SWTOR's campaign ultimately killing the Emperor, Revan now inexplicably is reborn, emerging with a legion of cult-like followers. A dark side entity intent on resurrecting the dead Emperor to purge his spirit once and for all.
I was a Dark Lord of the Sith. I was the prodigal knight. I was powerful, but I was also weak. Not anymore.
We then learn of his mysterious rebirth as Revan, as he has somehow split his psyche from his light side alter ego when he was defeated at the Foundry. Even though we later learn the threat of the Emperor looms elsewhere, after his defeat, Revan finally makes peace with his two sides, rejoining as one, and even though the Emperor's threat looms about, instead decides to become one with the Force.
Thank you for all you've done and for all you've shown me.
With all that being said, many fans were still left wondering in what universe should the Revankist lose to seemingly less powerful beings, and why would he be written out in such a manner? And there are several key factors that we can hypothesize. One, he was irrevocably corrupted. The first is that Revan developed an overdependence on Rakatan tech, which ultimately corrupted him to the dark side, as did his time wrestling with the Emperor, which his official flavor text in the Old Republic saying, Revan was willing to sacrifice his own troops to achieve military objectives. His creation of extermination droids now goes even further, demonstrating Revan's fanatical belief that any sacrifice is worthwhile to stop the Emperor. Perhaps he is mad. The cost paid willingly to battle the Emperor's will and even exert his own influence on the Emperor to keep him in check. Or perhaps the ideals of the Jedi proved insufficient in the end for a man neither Jedi nor Sith. Maybe, however, it wasn't the dark side, but the will of the Force as a whole. Like Scourge's visions, and to mirror his apprentice Malak, the Force needed Revan to lose. Everything he had achieved, although great, was destined to be concluded by the player in the Old Republic. However, the will of the Force, by extension, is the will of the writers at BioWare. They are ultimately the beginning and end of his chapter. But why would the writers choose to controversially kill off one of their most beloved characters and add insult to injury without choice, by the player's own hand? I believe that the ultimate reason post-KOTOR that Revan was doomed to lose was predetermined before any battle, and was him not living up to his name of revenge, but being specifically superseded by the player in the Old Republic. As freedom was important to BioWare, so too is their lead character Revan, defined by his ability to choose. In a world of destiny and fate, the player represented Revan, giving him autonomous power and agency. This was always the true source of Revan's power. When the player was removed after the events of KOTOR, this represents that Revan's choices were also removed. In the meta-narrative of Revan's story, we were his power, and BioWare took him away from us, leaving him at the hands of fate and a closed-ended plot, which historically has never been celebrated in RPGs, where you feel as though you have an impact on the world around you and relish the freedom of choice throughout. This lack of agency is, although subtle, something BioWare nodded at when Revan spoke of his own destiny previously not being predetermined in a line in the Foundry, and by putting on the mask once more, he was no longer our Revan, but now BioWare's Darth Revan, saying,
"There was a time, a moment, when my destiny wasn't certain. That moment is gone."
In this, I believe BioWare egregiously tried to pass the torch to the player character in the Old Republic in a bid to empower them. Yet in doing so, the trade-off left Revan's quest unfulfilled at his own hand, and leaving the experience of being forced to perish him at our very own hollow and disappointing. As his ultimate end, I felt like we should have been able to choose to side with Revan or against him in true RPG fashion, and dealt with the repercussions. Instead, we had BioWare step in at the last minute, almost as if they were the Revan embodied by the light side, telling us to put that idea to bed while we were bitterly forced to watch him fade away into obscurity in lieu of a greater threat in their next expansion, again starring the Emperor instead reborn once more. In conclusion, no matter how you cut it, Revan was destined to lose as soon as his fate was written, not by the player, but by the developers trying to leverage his memory to carry a massive MMO storyline into the hearts of new players and old alike. But what do you think? Is Revans Legacy upheld outside the player's control in the Old Republic, or does your headcanon scrub SWTOR from existence? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure also to like, subscribe to stay up to date with my upcoming lore videos out most weekdays at 7 PST-ish. And if you want to further the conversation, my social accounts are linked. I'd love to chat. We have a brand new Discord to celebrate lore and are running an Old Republic guild for fellow lore junkies with events and huge weekly giveaways, with the info on joining linked in the Discord, in which all are welcome. Thanks for watching, and until next time, Traveler.
You will be recognized as the saviors of the galaxy, the heroes of our age. But you must remain ever vigilant, for one day you may be called upon yet again to defend the glory of the Republic against the tyranny of the dark side. For this is the destiny of the Jedi.